Well, it's time now for perspective. For many of us, recent months have pushed us to our limits. Of course, some of us have been bored, confined to our homes, deprived of the background buzz of daily life, but others have been subjected to what they see as the tyranny of remote working and the erosion of the traditional boundaries between work and life. Either way, it's been a period that's revealed a lot about the pleasures, pressures, and challenges of modern life. My guest today is artist, writer, and educator Jenny Odell, author of How to Do Nothing, Resisting the Attention Economy. Thank you so much for being with us today on France 24. First things first, what exactly is the attention economy?
Well, the attention economy is just like any other economy. The currency is attention. So one really familiar example would be advertising, where obviously what an ad is trying to do is to get you to pay as much attention as they can, hopefully to buy something. But obviously social media is another example. So anything where, more attention is more profit could be described as the attention economy.
And presumably the attention economy is becoming increasingly important in contemporary life.
Definitely. And like I said, advertising is an old example. Social media is obviously newer. And I think one thing that's really pernicious about it is that those of us who participate in it, we also participate in the attention economy. So the types of statements and expressions that we make on these platforms are also kind of playing into those same principles of trying to get as much attention as possible.
And do you think most of us who use social media, for example, are aware of this aspect to our behavior online, the fact that people are making money off the fact that we spend time on their platforms?
It's hard to say. I feel like probably many people are sort of dimly aware of it, but I think that it's pretty troubling when you actually look into, in a more granular way, into the details of like how much effort and design is going into capturing and holding your attention. Just simple design things like notifications, but also, pull to refresh, like all of these sort of little design aspects that can very quickly, I think, become habitual for someone who interacts with them all the time. I think that's really the danger. So you might sort of know in the back of your head, it feels sort of addictive, or I don't feel good when I use this. But I think it's very instructive to actually sit down and look at all of the ways in which it's designed to do that.
And how easy is it, do you think, to come to the realization that we are, to a certain extent, beholden by these technologies? How easy is it to change our behaviors?
I think it's pretty hard. Well, again, it really depends on the person. I think it can be really hard to change your behavior, but I don't think it's hard to notice it as the sort of starting point. I mean, just as a simple example, I think even if, for example, if you're someone who uses social media every day, even just taking like 3 days off or 2 days off, even if you come back at the end, like when you come back, you are going to see all of these things, I think, or notice these things you might not have otherwise. So just kind of stepping aside. Also, just like talking to other people about it. I think many people have the same similar experiences on social media. So anything that you can do to kind of like get yourself out of that habitual way of interacting and kind of defamiliarize it a little bit for yourself, I think that's always helpful. In terms of like making long-term changes, I think there's a lot of talk about, digital detox and sort of once and for all cold turkey. And I think that's really unrealistic for a lot of people. I think more likely it's going to be a long-term negotiation with, that hopefully is going in a direction that you want it to be going in. But I think it's important to have some acknowledgement for what you're up against. Because again, you have a bunch of really smart people who are designing these things to be addictive. And then at the same time, for a lot of people, social media is where their friends are. It's where they interact with friends. It's where they find out about the news. So, I think it's a little bit, depending on who you are, it's a little bit unreasonable to just say, like, I'm going to throw my phone into the ocean and never look at it again.
Now, of course, the last few months, more than a year, in fact, we've seen lockdowns, restrictions of all sorts. France is now emerging from the harshest restrictions, as we've been mentioning during this morning. What have you found most interesting from an attention economy point of view about the last year or so?
I think there's a couple of things. One thing that I was kind of suggesting in my book is that it's not necessarily disconnection that you might be seeking, but I'm really interested in kind of more intentional connections that you would have. Even something like a group chat is an example of this, something where you're in a group or a network where you know people and you have some sort of context. And so I think the pandemic kind of showed that even though people were physically distant, they, at least in my experience, I did see people forming those networks, reaching out and, creating like groups of friends or, small groups. So to me, it did show that, we do have forms of technology that can allow us to stay connected, which being connected to other people is really important. People experienced so much isolation during the pandemic, and so it really showed that. But the other thing that was interesting is that because people were in one place, maybe more than they were used to, I found that a lot of people became more attentive to ecological cues. So, bird migrations, even if that's just like the crows on your street or the squirrels. I heard from a lot of people who, said for the first time, I noticed, the pigeons outside my window, and I started paying attention to them. And that's one way that I have been really interested in kind of disengaging from the attention economy, is to pay attention to something else. And so there was something else to pay attention to, and it was all of these kind of seasonal ecological changes that became perceptible because you were staying in one place.
And as the world starts to return to normal, a lot of people are going to start feeling FOMO again, the fear of missing out. You have spoken, I think, about the necessity of missing out. Why do we find it so hard to miss out on things?
I mean, there are so many reasons, and it sort of depends on how far do you want to go towards the ultimate reason, which I think is just reckoning with one's mortality, right? It's you can only do so many things in your life. And this feeling that you need to do everything all the time, that every moment could be anything and it needs to be as many things as possible, I feel is in some cases just a turning away from the larger question of how do you find meaning in your life? What should you be doing versus not doing? And that's a really big question. And then that's one thing that I do think during the pandemic, some people were faced with that question, especially people who, experienced loss or who witnessed loss, really had to sit with their priorities and think about what's important to them in life. And I think that can be really clarifying. I don't think you would have as much FOMO if you know what it is that you're sort of meaning to do and what brings value to your life.
We could discuss this for a very long time, I'm sure, but we have come to the end of our allotted time, I'm afraid. Jenny Odell, thank you so much. Jenny Odell, artist, writer, and author of How to Do Nothing, Resisting the Attention Economy. Thank you very much.